Unfortunately, I have more bad news about tomorrow's severe weather event, and this is all because we're dealing with the potential for a numerous to widespread severe weather event that'll take place anywhere from the central and southern plains back into the Ohio Valley and the Midwest. As we go into tomorrow, this is going to bring the threat of some significant severe weather, including damaging winds, large to very large hail, and a few tornadoes, which a couple of tornadoes could even be on the stronger side of things. With that being said, there is some good news to go along with this. Not everybody's going to see severe weather tomorrow, and even those that do see severe weather, you're not necessarily going to experience a tornado, large hail, or perhaps even damaging winds. So I'm going to break down exactly who has the greatest threat of severe weather for tomorrow, in addition to exactly when you can expect storms in your particular location. Let's begin first with the general outlook from the Storm Prediction Center, and this is the latest outlook. We actually have a very large enhanced risk of severe weather. This stretches from southwest Indiana back into Oklahoma. This is a 3 out of 5 on the severe weather scale if you're new to the severe weather outlooks. That's kind of middle ground in terms of a severe weather risk, but obviously a moderate or high risk, which are 4 out of 5 and 5 out of 5, are much higher on the scale. Those don't happen very often. Now, with all this being said, an enhanced risk is still something you want to take very seriously, because we are going to have some numerous to perhaps even quote-unquote widespread severe weather across this area, and the Storm Prediction Center has mentioned that a widespread severe weather event is very possible tomorrow across this area, meaning that damaging winds, large hail, and a few tornadoes will be possible. Outside of this, we have our slight risk of severe weather goes back into even northern Kentucky and southern Ohio, all the way back into North Texas. This is a 2 out of 5 on the severe weather scale. One key thing I do want to point out on this outlook is that down here in North Texas, this is slightly more conditional because of a cap. A cap is essentially a temperature inversion in the atmosphere that stops clouds from growing up to a certain height. If that cap is overcome, we will see some severe weather here, perhaps even significant severe weather, but if the cap holds, we will not see much severe weather there. So just one key thing I wanted to point out there. And then marginal threat of severe weather does exist from Kentucky all the way back down into areas like southern Texas. There's also a small little extension to a hail threat back over in the Oklahoma and Texas Panhandle for tomorrow. Now, the main concern with these storms are going to vary substantially on where you are in the United States. So I'm going to break down each threat individually for you with hail, damaging winds, and tornadoes, because they're all maximized in a different location. So let's go ahead and break that down for you first with the hail threat. And something I want to point out here is that we have a hatched area across southwest and central Missouri back into north parts of Texas. That includes North Texas. This is a hatched area, which represents the potential of larger than 2-inch diameter hail. So this area basically is a greater than 10% chance within a 25-mile radius of seeing the potential for over 2-inch diameter hail. And the maximum hailstone size tomorrow will likely be in the ballpark of about baseball-sized hail. No pun intended, by the way. With that being said, there is still a threat of hail outside of this area. We still have a chance for hail, even though it might not get to 2+ inch diameter hail. It even exists as far east as areas like Virginia and West Virginia, and as far south as areas like Texas. So just keep that in mind. But that would be the greatest threat of significant hail, and overall the greatest threat of hail in general, because this red area also represents large hail at a 30% probability within a 25-mile radius of occurring. So areas like Missouri, Oklahoma, and Kansas, make sure that you're protecting your vehicle tomorrow if you are in that red shaded area. Now, with all this being said, there's also a damaging wind risk, and this is going to be a little bit different comparatively to where the hail risk will be, at least for where it's maximized. And the maximized currently damaging wind threat is across areas in southwest Indiana, back into northeast Oklahoma, and as well as into northwest Arkansas, where there is a 30% chance within a 25-mile radius of damaging winds. That means flying trampolines are possible tomorrow. Even though we're not on tossing trampolines on Tacos Tuesday, this does not mean we can't see tossing trampolines on a Monday. So keep that in mind. Make sure you're hatching down your trampolines. Even outside of this area, we will still have an isolated chance for damaging winds in other spots. Now for the greatest tornado risk. And the greatest tornado risk at the time I'm recording this forecast is for areas like southern Illinois, southwest Indiana, and back even into areas like northeast Oklahoma, including basically one county. Not a very large area, by the way. But this is a 10% probability within a 25-mile radius of a tornado. In addition to that, we have a hatched area across southern Illinois and southern Missouri for the potential for seeing an isolated strong tornado. I do want to mention, though, I would not be surprised if we did have another 10% area get added back down into Oklahoma. So just keep that in mind. I will talk about why I think that might happen in a few minutes when I talk about the timing. That'll also be something to watch for. But even outside of this area, there is still going to be a chance for an isolated tornado or two, all the way from Texas back into Ohio. Now, I do want to remind you that there's no reason to panic about this event, even though it's going to be a pretty significant severe weather event. The odds of you seeing a tornado tornado are still extremely low, but obviously you want to make sure that you are taking the proper precautions and have a tornado action plan in place just in case, and also make sure that you have multiple ways to receive warnings. Don't just rely on your phone. Maybe have a YouTube live stream up, maybe have your television on, whatever it might be. Have other ways to just receive warnings in case you do go under a tornado warning or a severe thunderstorm warning tomorrow. Now, I do want to briefly talk about the severe weather setup for tomorrow. It's actually pretty interesting. Lots of moisture will be surging out of the Gulf of Mexico with strong southerly winds. We're going to feel very humid anywhere from the Midwest back into Texas. Notice dew points well into the low to mid 60s. This will create a lot of buoyancy tomorrow. That's going to help to elevate that tornado and severe weather risk in general tomorrow across areas from the central and southern plains back into the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. This is way higher, by the way, in terms of dew points than what we saw last weekend with that previous severe weather event, which is why this is a bit more concerning than the severe weather that we had back on Sunday. So just keep that in mind, and as well as even on Monday. Here's the overall instability in the atmosphere. This is what fuels severe storms, essentially one of the ingredients that we need to watch for. Lots of instability across areas in the central and southern plains, values upwards of 15 to 2,000 joules per kilogram. That's going to give you a pretty good idea that there is a good amount of fuel in the atmosphere for severe weather. In addition to all this, the low-level jet, which helps rotate supercells at the lower levels, will be coming out of the southwest. Very typical for severe weather season, a southwesterly flow. This will help to amplify the tornado risk as well, especially across this area right in here where the brightest red colors and the yellow colors are. That's where the strongest of the low-level jet will be, and that is where we do currently have that significant tornado risk, but we will likely at least get some sort of increased tornado risk as well across areas like eastern and central Oklahoma in this particular area here. So we will also have to watch for that as we go into Monday evening. Again, no reason to panic. Just make sure that you're staying very weather aware tomorrow, as there will be obviously probably a pretty good chance at least of multiple tornado warnings. All right, let's go through the timing. We're going to go south to north. We'll begin with North Texas, where the conditional risk of severe weather will exist. As of right now, the HRRR model is showing that storm development just north of Weatherford near Wichita Falls. This will be the area to watch for an elevated risk for severe weather. Basically, the further north you go of DFW, the greater risk you will have of seeing thunderstorms, and those could also be severe. I would be watching, though, for this area of rotation as we go closer to about 5 to 7 o'clock in the evening. These storms will try to rotate. We might get an isolated tornado just north of DFW. South of DFW, much more conditional risk. Obviously, anywhere in North Texas is conditional, but overall, the further south you go, it's going to be way more conditional on that cap being overcome. Now, further to the north in Oklahoma, storms will fire up right around 5 to 6 o'clock. They will really get going after about 6 o'clock, though. By 6 to 7, storms rumbling through areas in eastern and central parts of Oklahoma. I would say the big thing with the tornado risk right now is if these storms are spaced apart enough where they're discrete, I do think the tornado risk will be a bit more elevated. We could go to that 10% tornado risk in these areas from the Storm Prediction Center. But if they're a bit more condensed and really not really spread apart at all, I do think the tornado risk will probably stay at that 5% risk. As of right now, the HRRR is showing a lot more of these storms being much more condensed and really not split apart at all. So that will be something to watch for over the next 24 hours, and we'll have to see how trends go with the HRRR model and also other computer models. Back over in Missouri, this is one of the areas that'll have a bit more of a significant severe weather threat. Some large hail possible during the early to mid-afternoon hours north of Columbia. By the time we get closer to 6 to 7 o'clock, we will need to watch for supercellular development back down in southern Missouri. I do think overall this tornado risk will really be focused during the mid to late evening hours across areas in southern Missouri. We also will have a chance for a few storms near Kansas City, though I don't expect much of a tornado risk out of those. Large hail is definitely going to be a concern with any storms that develop over there. And then also, as we go closer into the later evening, storms will continue to move to the east and eventually into the overnight hours. We'll also be watching for storms rumbling across the St. Louis area. Probably going to at least get 1 to 2 rounds of storms there if you are in St. Louis. For those over in Illinois and Indiana, I am going to have a much more detailed breakdown on severe weather timing tonight in my Q&A live stream here on our YouTube channel. So make sure you're subscribed down below, click the bell icon so you're notified if and when we do go live tonight. But overall, storms will be ongoing pretty much all afternoon long. I think the severe weather risk, though, will start to it will really hold off, I think, until at least 3 or 4 o'clock for areas like southern Indiana and southern Illinois, where there will at least be a tornado risk there. In addition to that, I do think large hail will be really a dominant concern across these areas. Eventually, as we go into the later evening, more storms will likely fire up and maybe another tornado or two will be possible. Also, for today, there is a risk of severe weather. At the time recording this forecast, we have a slight risk anywhere from western Ohio back into eastern Missouri, and as well as southeast parts of Iowa and much of central Illinois. The main concern will be damaging winds and large hail. Notice, though, that there is a low conditional risk of a tornado, and why I say say that is because look at these two different computer models. This is 3 o'clock today. This is the HRR on the 00Z model run. Notice there are no storms out there at 3 o'clock, but look at the one from 6 hours ago. It shows the supercell back over north of Springfield. So I do think it's going to be a bit more of a conditional risk of severe weather today. We may or may not get a supercell that fires up, but if one does, we will have an elevated chance for maybe an isolated tornado or two. The really main concern, though, will be late tonight into the overnight hours, where there will be some storms producing some large hail and perhaps some isolated damaging winds. So keep that in mind. Make sure you're protecting your vehicle tonight, even though hailstone sizes shouldn't be too large. Obviously, it's a good precaution to take if you're in these areas. Make sure to subscribe to the channel in case we do go live tonight, and like the video.